Is your belly fat caused by insulin resistance? Let's talk about it. We talk a lot about belly fat because it's a health issue. Yes, your belly fat may be unsightly and you may not appreciate that your waist is thickening. It may be uncomfortable to bend over and tie your shoes with that roll of fat around your middle. But the greater issue is that that fat that you see on the outside may just be the tip of the iceberg. There also may be fat around your internal organs, and that internal fat is very, very inflammatory and can cause metabolic disorders, including diabetes and heart disease. So it's super important that you get your belly fat under control. Now, let's talk about what insulin resistance is, and then I'll show you why insulin resistance may be contributing to your belly fat. Insulin resistance is when your cell's receptor sites become desensitized to insulin and no longer let your insulin lock into its receptor. Now, insulin escorts glucose or sugar into your cells for energy production. If your insulin receptors are resistant to insulin, that means they do not accept the insulin, so glucose cannot get into the cells. But neither can water, amino acids, or fatty acids get in. And that's because insulin opens gateways for not just glucose, but also for amino acids, fatty acids, and water, which leaves your cells malnourished and dehydrated. And you without an adequate amount of energy. So if your blood sugar cannot get into your cells because they're insulin resistant, what happens to all that sugar? It gets repackaged by your liver into triglycerides, which are 3 sugar molecules on a lipid. And those triglycerides get stored in your belly fat. Now, your belly fat is actually a great place to store sugar for future use. Just like a bear in hibernation that lives off its fat storage, you too can survive for long periods of famine by living off the sugar stored in your belly fat. Now, your hypothalamus controls this very basic survival technique. When you consume more food than you need to expend for energy, and all that food is eventually broken down to sugar molecules, your hypothalamus directs your liver to repackage that extra sugar for you to use later. Except, unlike the hibernating bear, you don't have to survive for months not eating. So you just keep eating and storing sugar in your belly fat. Now, your organs that cannot use the extra sugar for energy become resistant to insulin to protect themselves. Your heart, for instance, can only use sugar to pump blood or to grow. If you're not running away from danger, then your heart cells become resistant to insulin and will not allow the extra sugar in, because a bigger heart is not healthy for you. So that extra sugar gets stored in your belly fat. Insulin resistance is a basic survival technique that we no longer need. With so much food available to us all year long, your belly fat is like a buoy to help you survive a long winter without food. Thank you, hypothalamus, for trying to help you survive. But you can take it from here. So how do you lose belly fat by reversing insulin resistance? There are 5 things you can do to help your cells become more sensitized to insulin and start losing that belly fat. Now, none of them are easy because it means you're going to have to make some changes, but they're still all very effective, and especially effective when you do them together. The number one thing that you need to change is what you're eating and when you're eating. So following an insulin-resistant diet while practicing circadian rhythm fasting is the best way to reverse insulin resistance. An insulin-resistant diet is basically a diet that is low in high glycemic index carbohydrates, those carbohydrates that get turned into sugar really quickly, like desserts and baked goods, breads, pastas, starches, potatoes. An insulin-resistant diet is really rich in lots of colorful vegetables and some fruits, adequate protein, and healthy fats. Following your natural circadian rhythm, you only eat in the daytime. From dusk to dawn, you fast and allow nocturnal hormones like melatonin to help resensitize your insulin receptors to insulin even faster, which means you're going to use that stored sugar in your belly fat for energy. Now, exercise is the second way to reverse insulin resistance and lose belly fat. Aerobic exercise, particularly high intensity training or HIIT, is very effective at sensitizing insulin receptors. Research has shown that as little as 3 20-second intervals of speed work 3 times a week can help reverse insulin resistance by sensitizing your insulin receptors to insulin itself. I find the HIIT exercise is actually fairly easy to do, and it really doesn't take much time. I like to go on a pretty fast walk, at least 5 to 10 minutes, and find a hill. Then I speed walk as fast as I can up the hill for 20 seconds and then very slowly walk back down, and I repeat the speed interval twice more and then cool down by walking back home. Just 3 times a week. It's a very effective way of keeping fit and especially reversing insulin resistance to lose that extra belly fat. The third thing you need to reverse insulin resistance and lose belly fat is to be sure you're getting good sleep. While sleeping, you're producing melatonin. This nocturnal hormone not only puts you to sleep, it also helps reverse insulin resistance. In order to make enough melatonin to resensitize your insulin receptors, it's critical that you're sleeping in the complete dark. And do not expose yourself to digital devices before you go to bed, because the blue light from the screens will halt your melatonin production. Your goal is to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night to effectively reverse insulin resistance and lose belly fat. The fourth thing is stress reduction. Stress increases adrenaline and cortisol production, and the higher your cortisol levels are, the more likely you're going to have more sugar floating around in the bloodstream, which means you need more insulin to get that sugar into the cells. And if you're not really running from danger, you don't need that extra cortisol or that extra sugar. So you can end up storing the sugar as belly fat. To reverse insulin resistance, you have to lower cortisol. And one of the ways to lower cortisol is to practice stress reduction techniques, which can include deep breathing, meditation, yoga, spiritual practices, journaling. There's lots of ways to reduce your stress. I have a particular meditation I call my calm meditation that is available in our hormone reboot training. And the fifth way that you can actually help to reverse insulin resistance is by supporting your hypothalamus. Now, I know I talk a lot about the hypothalamus, but it is super important that it gets the support it needs. Otherwise, you're going to be in a dangerous inflammatory state. Your hypothalamus controls your hormones, including cortisol, and your glucose metabolism. So, by supporting your hypothalamus, you can help normalize your glucose metabolism, resensitize your insulin receptors, and calm your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis so you're not producing too much cortisol. Why don't you join us in our hormone support group, where I answer your questions live? You can access the group by signing up for my free hormone reboot training. Remember, to reverse insulin resistance and lose that belly fat, you need to do 5 things. Know what and when to eat, exercise, get enough sleep, practice stress reduction techniques, and support your hypothalamus. I'll see you in the next video.